Welcome back to, man, we're inside the pub now.
I know.
So we've been doing a few in the studio, and it's been working out beautifully. But we're back because we have a special guest here on the podcast.
We have a special guest, and I wasn't going to put her outside because she's from Malaysia. So
we don't do cold well.
Oh, yeah. Just hot and humid.
Pretty much.
I love it. So now she's just a mystery voice on the show.
That's even
right
better.
now.
How long can we make this
great.
go?
Well, we got to thank our sponsors for this season. So number one, we got to thank Strixon for sponsoring the podcast. We appreciate them a lot for trust. We trust them with our game, and they trust us with the advertisement on the podcast. So thanks, Strixon. Also, too, we've got a new sponsor for the show and for the winter, Arcos. A lot of you guys might have heard Arcos tracking. So I actually tried it out today. There's basically some trackers that you stick on the end of your clubs and a little caddy that you put on your belt, and it'll go and track your game. So it'll automatically know what club you're hitting, where you hit it from, and how many strokes it took you to complete the hole. So I used it today, and I loved it. So they're going to be sponsoring the podcast for this winter and sponsoring Cracking the Code as well. So if you guys use the discount code, OneRule15.
Yeah, one is spelled all the way out. O-N-E.
O-N-E-R-U-L-E 1-5. You get 15% off your purchase from Arcos. So thank you, Arcos, for sponsoring this winter and the Champions Playbook.
Yep. So with Scott. That, so our I haven't seen you in a couple of years.
Remember, listeners don't know who it is.
I know. That's why I'm keeping the suspense so they'll keep listening.
I love it.
It's been, I don't think you've seen us up here in Franklin yet. So, and we had COVID, so that kind of locked everything down for a while. So, this person taught me to teach along with Hank. So, basically mostly talked about Hank. Some of you may remember we had Nick Dunlap live in person here.
Playing at Alabama now. He's officially an enrollee.
Yeah, he's there doing very well. So she got to spend some time with young Nick as we were all growing up. One heck of a talent. So I'll pick her brain on that. But anywho, I was the Padawan for a long time. She was a Jedi Knight, and Hank was Yoda. So
Hank is Yoda.
Our Jedi Knight, who's now known as Yoda in some ways by her own students, former LPGA Tour player for 10 years, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct. 10 years.
Is now has her own golf studio or golf academy over in Malaysia called Masters Golf Performance. Very good. Spent some time with the Malaysian national team, coaching, and so anywho, with that, Siew Lim is joining us.
Yes.
On the podcast.
Hello.
So welcome, Siew. Woohoo!
Thank you very much. It was a short flight here.
Yeah, a short flight. So you can see why our heights probably resemble each other for those who. Yeah, no, not at all. So, anywho, Siew, tell us a little bit about. Just kind of thinking, you've got your own golf studio or golf academy now. How long have you run that? And kind of where is your program headed, I guess, is kind of a good starting point.
Masters Golf Performance was established in 2016, June of 2016. I had gone back to Malaysia in 2013, start of 2013, and I was working for another company then. And then kind of opportunities presented itself, and I started, I was given an opportunity to start my own thing. So 2016, I started my own golf academy. Was at another golf club in Malaysia called Glen Mary Golf and Country Club. And so I started out there, been there since then. And over the time, I had one young professional that was with me. So I taught him how to teach to get it all started. His name was Jonathan. And Jonathan was very good with kids and kind of helped him establish himself as a golf instructor. And then later on, right before COVID started, well, when COVID started, we kind of didn't have much going on.
Yeah, y'all were on a lot more lockdown than we were here in the
our
States,
lockdowns were ridiculous. But May of 2020, I got another apprentice that started with me. And then October of that same year, another guy joined me. And so it's been growing slowly.
And you said 5 or 6 now? You have 5?
5. So those two guys, Nick and Shane, that started in 2020, they both got certified to teach. And once we were released from lockdown, golf went gangbusters in Malaysia. It was phenomenal, mainly because that was one of the few sports you could play. So they just wanted to get out of the house.
Yeah.
So there a lot of people started learning how to play golf, which was great for the golf industry there. And then we started, a lot of kids started picking the game up as well because suddenly golf became cool again. So I think early April this year, another young gentleman started to apprentice with me. And so he makes 4. And then I have about 5 guys right now teaching. And then once I get back in November, I'll have another young gentleman apprenticing with me as well.
You're getting a picture of where we're going here. If you can kind of hear those layers, we've got some people coming in, and I'm currently starting that process next. So it's a lot of fun. We both learned under Hank Johnson there to teach, and so we have a lot of similarities in how we teach. We have a model for how to coach people, which is really cool. I think there's a lot of other places where it's like they just kind of grow up doing it, but they don't have it modeled, so they're trying to reinvent the wheel. And we've already got the structure there, even if we make minor modifications to it.
Right.
Like the structure there is really solid. So
now, speaking of Hank, and I'd love to get both of y'all's take on this because you're doing the same thing on opposite sides of the world almost. Why do you think that golf in 2020 took off so much? I mean, there's the obvious answer of lockdowns and the fact that it was something that you could do outside of the home, but golf does seem to be cool again. Why do you guys think that is?
Well, I think for here in the States, it's like we have things like Topgolf that have made it entertaining. The last number I heard was that 30% of new golfers in the States, at least, had their first experience with Topgolf. So of the new golfers that came in, their first experience was through something that was relatively it's just fun, and it's relatively easy. You know, as a beginner trying to play the game, making 12s and 15s on every hole isn't all that fun and entertaining.
Or just sitting on the driving range with one pasture out in front of you.
Yeah, and we've got I mean, it started in Texas, and we'll have the Operation 36 people on here in the podcast in a couple of weeks. But Operation 36, starting kids from 25, 50, 100 yards. I just had a match today with some kids. It's just they get to start close to the green and build some success, genuine success, with the part of the game that represents a fairly high percentage of the shots. So, you know, I think there's a lot of improvements overall through the program. You had TPI before Op 36. I think what Op 36, you combine it with a TPI structure, is really kind of powerful. They kind of go hand in hand.
And now for those listening, describe in 10 seconds TPI and Op 36.
I'll let Siew talk more on the TPI. But the Op 36 is the whole goal and structure of it is like, let's get kids to shoot 36, even par, and kind of build this mindset of being able to be under par, which I think is really cool. It may take them longer, but they start from 25 yards and go back by 25, they go to 50, and then they go to 100, and then it progresses on until a full set of tee box. So
totally,
it's a wonderful way. It's like raising the hoop for a kid shooting basketball, that kind of stuff. So wonderful structure. But I think that's one of the reasons why it's boomed. Golf has 3 problems. It costs a lot of money. It's really hard. And it takes a lot of time. Topgolf really solved all 3 of those. Especially if you bring a group of 6 people, people are like, it's $40. I was like, well, if you got 6 or 8 people standing there, split that. You're there for an hour. The food's great, so it's fun, entertaining. You got TVs. Mm-hmm. You can literally top it, and it go down into a target, and you get some points. So you can be successful in a small way, and it's fun. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It doesn't take much time. You can be there for 30 minutes. You can be there for 4 hours if you want.
So let's take a plane ride around the world. What does that look like over in Malaysia?
Well, we don't have Operation 36 in Malaysia because mainly our golf courses tend to be quite packed out. So we don't have a lot of golf courses, especially for opportunities to play during peak hours. So what they do instead is they have a lot of these virtual golf. So they have a lot of the indoor golf facilities. And so they have, things like TrackMan or GC quads. And they have indoor facilities that people go in, very similar to that of Top Golf, but instead of an outdoor where you're hitting golf balls out towards them, you're just hitting it to a screen.
Yeah.
And then they also will have their own F&B and dining and all that's with it.
Cool. Very nice.
Yeah, no, I think obviously there's the obvious part of COVID, right? People have just been stuck inside and they want to get out and do something. But I still fundamentally believe, so like one of my big things, right, is people can do hard things. I actually think people want a challenge. People don't want everything to be easy all the time, but they want to be able to see that they can get better and improve. And overall, I think the quality of instruction across the golf industry has improved. I think we are able to stand out in ways that put us, a head up, a notch up because of our experience with Hank. I mean, Hank was right there with the Butch Harmons and the David Ledbetters of the world, like top of the top. And I remember Hank telling me stories when they were at the Golf Digest schools, and Toski'd look at Hank and go like, Hank, you got him fixed in the first day. Like, slow down. Like, we got them here for a week. They spent whatever it is, $1,500 or $3,000 to be here for a week, and they're done in the first day. Like, let's stretch this out. They're going to start to think they can only come for one day, But, like, that's who we learn from. And, I had 10 years under it. You were probably around that same. He coached you, too, so you got a lot of that through.
Yeah, I mean, I started working with Hank since 1999. And when I left, 10. It was 2012.
Yeah, so 13.
So I mean, I was working with Hank first as a professional golfer.
You were on the tour at that point.
Yeah, I was on tour at that point, and then he didn't really want me to teach while I was playing, and so I would kind of sneak in and just sit and watch some lessons in between shots. So I would be doing that. I would help out with some of the ladies' clinics. And junior camps and stuff like that.
Why would he not want you teaching while you're playing? Do you think it's kind of just
really
distracting?
Good. This is really good.
I think
just for those of them out there who don't know.
There's a part of it where, and I recognize that more now as a golf instructor, and when I'm not playing, is mainly because you don't need to clutter your mind as a player. You just need to know what you need to do as a player. You don't need to know theories. You don't need to know everything there is to know about the golf swing. You just need to know everything there is to know about your golf swing. Well, that's what's important.
Speaking of you playing on tour as well, I'd love to, and I think the listeners would love to hear as well, your journey from turning pro and then being on tour, what that's like as a part of the LPGA and some of the challenges, some of the awesome benefits, some of the rushes that you were going on. I mean, how was your life on tour from turning pro and then staying on tour for as long as you did?
So start from, you played at South Carolina.
I did play at South Carolina.
So start there and kind of give us the rundown.
Okay. Well, I played. I got a full scholarship at South Carolina. They found me in the mailbag.
Yeah.
And the offer was made to me when I won the Thailand Ladies Amateur Open. I got a call from the coach to come to South Carolina and on a full scholarship. So off I came. And then after that, played for them for 4 years. Was Conference Player of the Year, SEC Player of the Year in my junior year. All-American also that same year.
Wow.
That cool?
That's so cool.
And I think I won regionals that year too, NCAA regionals that year. So it was a very packed season. I finished my senior year. I think I finished I want to say 6 on at NCAAs.
It's unbelievable.
So it was a I had a really fun career at South Carolina.
That's so cool to hear too, because as somebody who's played team sports their entire life, we're used to winning as a team and losing as a team. So the fact that you're like, hey, I was the 6th best player in the SEC that year. I mean, that's in the entire NCAA. Excuse me.
Nationals,
Just unreal. That's so cool. So you're at South Carolina, play all 4 years. Tell us about that transition to the tour.
So the next step was to try and play Q School. Q School was very different because you go out there and you think you're great after having a very stellar college career, and then you find out that everybody that's there has also had a very stellar college career.
Oh yeah.
So I didn't get through Q School that first year, that first attempt. I think I made it all the way to final stage, and I think I made the cut on the final stage, and then I kind of tanked it on the last day. So I missed getting my card, but I played on the Futures Tour and did really well. And that was that was my first year. I did really well on the Futures Tour. Got ready to go for Q School again and missed both first stages. I was like, oh, that was a gut punch.
We've talked about the difficulty of getting out there.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to do it on that moment. Like, if you play well the week before, 2 weeks after,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
We had a podcast a couple months ago with Monday Q Info.
Ryan.
Monday Q Info, if you want to follow him on Twitter.
Yeah,
but he follows all of the guys who are trying to Monday qualify for everything. And you can be one of the best players that aren't on the tour and still miss the cut and not qualify for a tournament.
Oh yeah.
So I'm sure, was nerves a part of that as well, being like, man, I got all the way to the final stage last year.
Right. I mean, I think when you go in with expectations as well, and you think, I'm gonna do it, and then when you tank, it's heart wrenching.
Sure.
So I went back the following year, played on the Futures, did pretty well, went back to Q School again.
So this is your
third time. And I had a very interesting Q School. I shot 84 the first day.
Oh, no.
Oh, my.
I shot 67 the next day.
So this goes to the, we'll let you keep going, but this ties into a lot of things we've been talking about for the last 2 years of, people are like, I'm so inconsistent. It's like, this happens to the best players in the world.
17 shots swing.
Yeah, 17 shots.
And so 84, 67, 70, 73. I think those are the numbers. It's been a while. And got my card.
What was that feeling like when you got your card after all of that?
Relief.
Relief?
Relief. It wasn't even excitement. It's just like, I did it, finally.
I remember Hank used to say it's like your annual job interview.
That's a really good way of putting it.
It's an annual job interview.
Yeah.
You miss it, you try again next year.
Yeah, there's I'm thinking of some of the stories Hank used to tell about Siew too, and it happens to everybody. So this is you first get out there, and you start to be recognized as a good player, and it's like you get this equipment, they'll give you this equipment, and you got this equipment, you can do this thing over here. So Hank would tell these stories about it's not just Siew, right? It's so easy to get lost in the environment.
My first year on tour, I was like a kid in a candy store. It was on Mondays and Tuesdays on the driving range on tour, you would get all the club manufacturers there just wanting you to use their stuff. Because come Thursday, there's someone at the tee box working for Darrell's Survey that's checking your equipment to see what you're using. And they're trying to get on the Darrell Survey. So I remember that first year I was on tour, and I'd be like, oh, this is nice. And they were like, do you want it? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, oh. And I think I walked off that first tournament the first day at a tournament. I think I was in Arizona. I was at Moon Valley Country Club. And I walked off that day with 4 drivers and 2 putters and a wedge. They were like, try it. I'm like, okay.
Your bag was just full of head covers and nothing else.
I just had clubs. I'm like, I didn't care. I just had them. And there's Hank always said, you tour players, if it's free, it's for me.
I love that saying.
Man, that's so great.
Well, now I've got a question because from baseball, we had our equipment preferences. When you got onto the tour, did you go in with, man, I'd want this, that, and this? Or did you have a certain manufacturer, or were you just trying to try everything? How was that process of choosing your equipment for the tour?
Oh, Lordy, I'll be honest with you now. I was clueless when I first went in. Coming from Malaysia, club fitting was not big when I was growing up.
Interesting.
And so for us, it's buy a club, and you figure out how to make it work. And that was how I learned.
Sure.
After that, when I got to college, there was a little bit different, but not too much. They would be like, "Oh, you need this? Okay, here," and that was it. My first real proper fitting was with Hank, and he said, "Oh, you're going out to California? Here, I'll come out there too." So we were at TPI, Titleist Performance Institute, and I got properly fitted for the first time, and I was mind blown. I was standing on the range there, and they would be like, "Okay, here's your pitching wedge. All right, it's flying 115 yards. Okay, what gapping do you want?" And I looked at them like, "Huh?
What's that?
You mean I can choose?"
You mean I can have this club go exactly the distance I want?
Yeah, and they're like, "Yeah."
At this point, you're the 6th best player in the NCAA at this point.
I'm on tour at this point.
You're on tour. Like,
yeah, she's now one of the best in the world.
You've done so well up to this point, and now you're finally getting your fitting experience. Right. And Scott and I have talked on multiple podcasts about how important it is to get fit for clubs. Right. And you went your whole life and were as successful as you were without even a proper fitting.
Correct.
So for those of you listening at home, you understand who we're talking to here.
Well, I think too, you have to understand there's a difference, like, just overall culturally, right? So
totally.
Like information is almost ubiquitous at this point in our current culture, right? Mm-hmm. And so like everybody's an expert. It's really easy for everybody to be an expert. And so like there's some good in that because people being able to study and learn things in ways that they weren't able to do before, you can kind of catch the wolves in sheep's clothing kind of thing. So you can see if you're being lied to or manipulated into buying a product or buying a big package of lessons or whatever. And so back then, like, you trusted the experts. And so it's just a different world now. Like, and so I think understanding that, and I think trying to let people see experts as being experts and just trusting is in some ways harder to do now. I think there's an education component to that, and we almost have to earn their trust where they can shut down the other things.
Right. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things I have these days is I used to ask people when they come to me for their first lesson interview, who's your coach? And today I have to go, do you watch YouTube?
Oh,
yeah.
And the number of people that have watched YouTube and have gotten thoroughly confused just blows my mind. And I'm like, keep watching. Great marketing for me. Because they get confused enough, they have to find someone to kind of untangle the web.
And it's not even that the information is necessarily wrong. This is why I've referred to YouTube as like the WebMD of golf instruction. It's like this content on WebMD is not intended to be wrong and confuse you, but that is its unintended effect a lot of times. And so it's for us to untangle that, it can be a challenge. But the golf swing's incredibly complex, and there's so many things that are out there, and they got competing philosophies. They don't understand that there's the base of those two things is actually entirely different. And so we're back to the evaluation.
You mentioned about TPI earlier, and TPI's basic mantra is that there are many ways to swing a golf club, but there's one efficient way for you to swing the club. And a lot of that is based upon your body, what your body can physically do. What YouTube does is that it's telling you general information, which is accurate, but it may not fit your body makeup or what your body can physically do. And range of motion issues are unique to every single person. And so that's why, for me, I've been asked many times to do YouTube videos, and I'm like, nah, that's just not my thing, mainly because there's so many components that you can't account for.
Yeah, and, one of my favorite quotes, Sue, I got to meet Thomas Twitty, who I spent a lot of time with back at Pure Performance in Birmingham, he said, Scott, where we're headed is what people don't need, they don't need more information, they need management of the information that's there. And I think that's where, there's some threat to, like, golf instruction because of people taking online lessons. It's like, sure, we can look at a swing video via FaceTime and say, thanks, Hudson, and say, okay, yeah, we can see these patterns. But it's really difficult. Like, when I'm in person, you can sense things, feel things. You got personalities, you got learning styles, you've got nuance that you can't see through 2D video, which flattens the image. Like, there's so much that you can't do through that. And so as you've seen, like, I haven't done anything on Instagram in like 4 months because I'm trying to figure out, like, what am I supposed to do with this space? Like, I definitely need to be involved in it in some capacity. I haven't really decided yet. And so I felt like it was a good time for me to pull back the reins a little bit just to kind of, let's get a 30,000-foot view and then figure out what to do with it.
And I think also not just the 2D side. Sometimes it's the attention to detail. It's how you hold a grip, where your hands are, and sometimes from a video, you can't see the details. And
so this is perfect. We've talked about this where we've gone out on the golf course. I've gone out with Jack, and I remember the one day we were on the fourth hole. We're just sitting there and we're watching 4 guys walk off the green. I said, I bet you I can tell you what their swings look like. Right? Like, just watching how they're walking with the club in their hand, like, you can kind of tell how they're probably going to hold the club, and we're 150 yards away from them. Like, you can see those patterns of movement before they even swing the golf club. Now, am I going to get the swing exactly correct? No. Am I going to get the basic pattern? Probably, more than not.
He's being generous, too, Suai. When we were out there, so they're coming off, we're on the 4th hole, but they're coming off 7 green and walking up to 8. And he's like, all right, this guy,
I stood up and showed you.
You did stood up and show, but you're like, his left leg's going to do this, and, he's going to come over the top because he's compensating in this way. Sure enough, goes up there and hits his drive. I mean, it's exactly how he described it. And this is one of my...
That's the Hank stuff that we picked up on. You're like...
This is probably my 2nd or 3rd time, like, seeing his wizardry that he does. And at that point, I was like, all right, this guy just gets it.
Well, I remember times where we're sitting there... I didn't realize this till you reflect back on it, and as you get in those later years with Hank and you start to see it, as the person's walking up for a first lesson and they're just talking to Hank, he's watching every little movement that they're making when they're talking, like how somebody talks with their hands. Like, you won't see a really good player stand here and talk with their hands like this. They'll talk in this way, or they'll talk this way if they're a fader. Like, you can see, like, those habits are so deeply ingrained in people's body movements, and you can start to recognize who's played baseball, who's played tennis, like...
Oh, my God. From baseball, too, like, you're so right on how they move your hands. And so, like, for me, I'm really used to that motion, that inside motion, as you can even see here. And so it was pretty natural for me to go to golf and turn it over and pull it down almost. But it's just like these little innuendos that you understand or don't understand. I'm sure that's interesting for both of you guys to see when you're seeing someone for the first time.
And that's a whole nother layer, like, deeper than TPI is, like, how did you learn to move growing up? Right. Like... How does your body want to move on top of the injury and all that? So it's just kind of, I don't know, we were very, I think lucky's too soft of a term. I think we were blessed to be able to have that opportunity and to do it for so long. I really think she and I are in a position to, in some ways, reset the code of bringing people back to how apprenticing really works. Apprenticing's virtually gone in the Western culture. And I think it's just such a wonderful skill. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go for 10 years like we did, but a solid 5 where you're deeply ingrained in learning that. I mean, the only places that it still exists in some ways are the medical community. It's not even in engineering anymore. It's falling out of engineering. It's falling out of pastoring. It's falling out of all these spots. And there's so much wisdom in apprenticing.
Well, Siew, too, I want to get your take on this, because how much of you being with and around Hank, how much of that is you just putting in your 10,000 hours, and how much of that is actually learning from Hank? Like, what is the difference there?
I don't think you can separate the two. I think for me it was kind of a whole package. I mean, some of it was learning about my swing, some of it was learning about just the basics on how he taught, but a lot of it was just observational, and I think there's so much you can learn by not saying anything and just observing, because the minute you start to try and put what you're thinking into that lesson, you miss on so many things that's happening. And lots of times when I was starting to think, I'm like trying to figure out, oh, he told him to do this, and I'm standing back here trying to figure out how it fit into my swing.
Right.
And one day Hanks pulled me aside and said, you got to just watch. Don't be swinging in the background, because 1, it distracts the student, but 2, you'll miss out the next thing. And for me, I was like, oh, okay. So I stopped doing that, and I started watching, full attention, just watching. And it was amazing how quickly he transitioned bit by bit into the final product. And the problem is, I'm sure Scott had this problem too. It's like, if you miss the first 10 minutes of the lesson, you miss the fix.
You missed
the fix.
In fact, like in collecting the video and getting the video set for Hank, the fix might already be done. You're like, uh-oh, what happened? Like,
how did it change?
Wait, what happened? And then there's the times of like, how did he see that? And
the magic car. Do you remember the magic car that always had all the clubs that was needed?
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. There was like, if you think of like Mary Poppins, like out of this empty bag, you're like, there's nothing in there. We've shared moments of this on the podcast, but I know some of these are 100 episodes ago. But I remember we were in the TaylorMade Performance Lab.
Yep.
With
Tim.
With Tim, and then
the Mat Lab.
I can't remember. Is one of the girls that we taught.
It happened so many times.
Gosh, it happened all the time. So we were in there doing a putter fitting, and Tim's got 50 putters in there, and the Mat Lab pumped out, hey, she needs a face balance putter with full offset with a line on it. Well, Tim didn't have one of those in the 50 putters. Like, it's a really rare fit. And Hank looked at me and said, hey, Scott, here are my keys. Go in my trunk. I've got a putter in there. It's got a head cover. So it's got a head cover on it. I said, okay, I grab it. There's one club in Hank's trunk.
And it's the exact
one. And I come back, and as I'm walking in, I'm like, I'll take a peek at it before I get inside. Like, I was like, do I take it? Do I take it off? Do I not? Sure enough, it's a face balance putter with a full offset with a line on it. I was like, here's a $250,000 piece of equipment, and he did it. And so this is why you hear, you go and search Butch Harmon giving talks. Butch Harmon's like my TrackMan's right here.
Right.
And it really is, and what their eyes do far better than the TrackMan. TrackMan's only telling you what the club and the ball did. That's it. It doesn't tell you how the person learns. It doesn't tell you how they understand. It doesn't connect all the parts of the golf swing. Even a 3D motion capture is only doing, the human brain is doing umpteen thousand more things on top of that.
Right.
It was so cool to watch.
Well, and it's so interesting too how that skill can be learned, but it's also there's also people who can do it all over the world. I was watching a video of the channel name is called Random Golf Club, and he went to Miura's facility over in Japan, I believe, and the guy fit him for a club. He's the master club fitter, and all he does is just get down on one knee right behind the student and watches, and he can hear it, he looks at it, and he fits them. There's no technology in this bay whatsoever. And when I saw that, was reminded of everything that you told me about Hank, and I'm like, this guy does it with golf clubs the way that Hank fixes golf swings. It's unbelievable.
I remember this is kind of my last years there, around year 7 or 8. Just there were the years where Hank's like writing their notes at the end, and he's like, that was a good one. I was like, what are you talking about? You're not even looking. Like, you can't say that was a good one. You're literally looking down here. Like, your peripheral can't even see out that way. Not even possible. I just remember sitting next to Hank and like, what are you looking at? And I can't see it. And then it was about year 8 for me where I'm finishing up with Katie Tangy on the driving range at Timberline. I'm turning around talking to Grayson Gladden. And Katie hits one. I was like, Grayson, I had my back to Katie. I was like, did that ball draw? She was like, yeah. I was like, It's not just a solid shot. Like, there's a distinct difference in sound between a draw and a fade and a slice. Like, there's a different sound. Even if they're hit solid, there's a different sound. And I was like, that was the aha moment. And I couldn't do it all the time at that point. I still can't do it all the time. But it's like, he could hear it with his ears. And he's writing notes at the same, and he knows the swing well enough. I'm guessing there's even the point that he could tell what the swing looked like by any sound on the driving range.
Pretty much.
Like, that's 50 years of teaching and coaching, and I'm 12 years into it, and Suai's, 20-ish?
Oh.
22?
I stopped counting. I stopped counting.
2012 was 12 years, so 20-ish years, like.
I started in 2009, yeah.
I remember him telling me, this was after Suai had left, he said, the two of you are going to be able to do more than I could do because you got this head start. And, we've seen other guys in the area go and teach on their own at another club, and even Brooks is like, why didn't you come and sit here and ask to learn from Scott? Like, what do you think you can do on your own? Like, Scott's got 10 years of world-class experience under his belt because of who he learned from.
Now, Suai, I'm curious from not only your experience with Hank, but also your experience on tour as well as a player. We know now with social media, TaylorMade will put out these videos, and these tour players can tell the difference between 1 wrap, 2 wraps, if there's an extra ounce of metal in the driver head. Like, how much of your tour experience was aided then by Hank and vice versa, and does that help you in teaching now?
I don't have that piece, so.
Exactly. Another reason why I wanted to ask, Scott.
I played in college, but I don't have that piece.
Yeah.
I think being a tour player has really influenced the way I teach. I think for me, I don't teach necessarily technique to always be able to hit perfect shots. For me, my bend has gone towards helping my student be able to take a swing that will work on the golf course and almost work immediately. If not, there's always a.
Does that sound familiar?
There's always a fail-safe way. Like, oh my gosh, nothing is working today. Okay, this is what you do when nothing is working today. As a player, I realized also, and this is just me personally, is that when I'm out playing, I need to be able to shut my brain off. Because inevitably, there's going to be a time when I get over there, I'm like, I wonder why this works. And so I'm hitting shots, and I'm like, yeah, it works. Now, how does this work? And so I've learned quickly when I start having students that way, I'll be like, okay, let me explain it to you so you can shut that part of the brain off. Because once that is answered, they go, oh, okay, that's a bit too complicated, but okay, now I understand kind of where you're coming from, and so, okay, I'll just do it.
Well, it's another beautiful part of the game, too, right? Because we've talked about the similarities between golf and baseball before, but I think the difference, especially in this setting right here, is with baseball, we take so many reps in the cage to where we don't have the ability to be able to, and it could be a blessing, could be a curse, we don't have the ability to, when we're actually performing in the game, there's tenths of a second between the time that the ball is pitched and the time that we have to decide to swing. And so in some ways, we're forced to turn our brains off because we literally can't process the information and still be on time to hit the ball. So it's interesting to see the similarities, but also how mentally tough you have to be in golf to achieve an outcome that you could be fully able to achieve yourself, if that makes any sense. With having your brain off.
I'm curious to get Suai's take on what I'm about to say. And she'll probably have a more nuanced way, but like, I don't even necessarily like the term mental toughness. It just makes everything seem like a fight all the time. And like, I think fighting language is not helpful. It's more about mental discipline. Like, you have thoughts that just come out of nowhere sometimes. You're like, where'd that come from? Like, you're getting over a putt, and it was, I think it was Raymond Floyd. I could be getting the story wrong. She'll correct me probably. But he's on the last hole, and he's like, the only way I can lose this tournament is if I 5-putt this. And he's got like 10 feet. Like, where'd that thought come from? You know, like, and so you still have to have the mental discipline to like redirect and grab on, and maybe you can call that mental toughness. I don't know. I think there's a discipline.
I think they're very different. I think mental discipline is the ability to control what you're letting float through your brain. I think too many times we let stuff float by and we don't rein it in, and so that's where it gets you into trouble. I think mental toughness is being able to stay up with it and not let a situation or an environment overwhelm you. So I think they're they're kind of different. Those are the words I would use. The toughness to stay on track or to stay on task, so to speak, without kind of wilting.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a total difference between
I like
the two.
that. I think that's a better description of it, which is why I wanted your take on it from a player standpoint. I think people tend to just go for one or the other. Like,
there's so many aspects though to the mental side of the game. It's a bit. I mean, I have a degree in psychology. I don't use it much.
You probably use it every day in many ways.
Maybe I'm using it without knowing it.
Oh, totally.
But I think it's helped me understand that there's. I mean, and I do read up on a lot of it as well because it is an area of interest. But I think at the end of the day, just from my experience of playing on tour and seeing the best play, it's understanding that just because there's an adverse, something adverse happens in your round doesn't mean your round's done. I learned that my rookie year on tour. I had it on the LPGA. We have to do something known as rookie hours. And the rookie hours is to help rookies understand that golf tournaments don't just happen. And so we have to kind of put in so many hours in the year and kind of be behind the scenes, so to speak. So one of the rookie hours I did was actually becoming a standard bearer at one of the tournaments. I figured if I'm going to be doing my rookie hours, I might as well be watching golf, right? So I am doing standard bearing for Julie Inkster, Hollis Stacy, and Donna Andrews. I was like, oh, good group. So I'm on the golf course with her, and Julie triples, if I'm not mistaken, she triples or doubles the first hole, and I'm going, might not be a good day for her, right? She proceeds to finish 5 under par that day. And I got to see the entire round. And I'm going, what in the world happened? And it came to me that just because you start off bad doesn't mean you're going to play bad. It's just because you'd had a bad first hole.
What did you see from her in that round where you were like, wow, that's different?
It didn't faze her that it was a bad hole. It didn't faze her it was a bad first hole. She just went to the next hole and just kept playing.
It's funny. Do you remember the first round of the Tour Championship this year?
Yes.
Rory McIlroy triples the first hole. He goes triple, bogey, and then birdie, double. Like, you look at his card from the first day, you're like, this guy's totally out of control. But, like, he just, same thing, just, and stoic's probably not the right term, but, like, just very this way. And I think that's something you have to learn by experience. You can't just tell somebody to just be like that.
That's mental toughness.
Right. And so there's both the discipline of, like, not letting yourself go there, and then just, like, I got to stay here. Right. Like, so I can see the two going together there. It's really good.
And I'm curious to get your take on this, Siew, because I think a lot of us will watch sports, and the best of the best can just go to this place in their head and accomplish the task. What are some of the things that you saw on tour from some really special players that you were just like, wow, that's just different. That's just a different breed that I just have never been around before.
Don't you love Jack's questions?
Oh, I have a fantastic story. I was my rookie year on tour, and I got paired with Annika Sorenstam in my third round, and I got onto that first tee. Thankfully, I got to tee off first. So there's a huge crowd around the tee, and I was like, man, there are a lot of people watching golf today. And then they announced me, international player, rookie player. I tee off, you get the golf clap. You know, everybody's nice and polite.
Good shot?
Nice shot, down the middle.
Very nice.
So then Annika steps up, and they read that list. She was the player of the year last year. She was a U.S. Open champion.
It's like Phil
winner.
Mickelson going like, we got it, to Tiger that one day, yeah.
So it just goes on. And the longer I stand there, the smaller I get, right? And right when he's done, and he says, Annika Sorenstam, the whole crowd goes wild. And I leaned over to my caddy. I goes, I think they came to watch her play. and so they're like, okay. So she hits a really good shot. We play, I think I get to my 8th hole, and I look at the standard bearer that's following us, and I'm going, I'm 2 shots ahead. I'm like, man.
Yes,
so
go
I'm
me.
like, yeah. I was like, all right. And then I make a par on the 9th. She birdies, so I'm still a shot ahead. I'm like, that's okay. Then I make a par on 10th. She birdies. So I'm like, okay, we're all tied up now. Then she makes a birdie on the next hole, and I make a bogey, and I'm 2 shots back. 3 holes later, I'm like, what happened?
Got hit by Annika.
I just got steamrolled by Annika. She just like, all right. And what I notice is that players of that caliber, when you start playing at that level, they have that extra gas that they can just step on and just take off.
Anytime they want.
And what I see is that a bad shot doesn't faze them, but their bad shots doesn't kill them either.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
So they're bad shots, and I played with Annika a couple of times when I was on tour, and every time I played with her, I learned something. Her misses were fairway, just off fairway in the rough, but she would always be able to get it back and get the up and down. I played with Lorena as well, and Lorena is a lot of fun. She's very feisty. But she's a lot of fun to play with. And she hits it a country mile. I mean, it's like you hit a drive, you're feeling good, and that ball is still climbing as it's passing you, right? So
Hey.
she's like, hey, nice to see you. I'll catch you up 50 yards ahead. But she was a competitor. I mean, I think everything that I noticed about players is that they are competitive. It doesn't have to be golf. I mean, I saw them play tennis in Mexico. And caddies were worried because they thought one of us was going to pull something. But if you put a bunch of tour players together, it doesn't matter what sport. We used to have a softball game we would play at one of the tournaments, and caddies were like, no sliding, no.
The caddies are making rules like
Caddies are making
none of y'all
rules.
allowed to get hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the caddies give you your bat too as you walk up to the plate?
They just don't want us to hurt ourselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think there's a competitiveness that's there, and they get themselves positioned. They put themselves in position to be able to play, and then once the time comes when they need to and they see that opening, they just gun it.
Jack, the closest thing you got to like in-person experience with that was when you got to see Austin Jean shoot the course record out here.
Oh yeah.
And so Austin's one of my kids who was at Montevallo. I started working with him. He was at Arkansas Tech. You've seen me post about him. Right. He has 9 course records right now.
Wow.
I mean, he's had 2 of them have been passed, but like he's got 9. And we're playing the front 9. We're playing with Micah Stangby, one of my other really good players. And Micah's 3 under through 8. We played the back first. Austin's 1 under through 7. Birdie's 8, which is 17. Then he birdies 18, and all of a sudden they're tied. It's like, wait a second, because Micah bogeys 18. And Austin kind of makes this comment. He's totally aware the whole time. He's like, I'm just a little off. I'm a little out of position. Like, I just need to adjust my position slightly. That's when you got to see him go on this tear on the back nine. It's like birdie, birdie, par, eagle, par, birdie, birdie. It's like, what happened? He shot 63.
Scott's leaning over to me at this point, and he goes, Jack. He goes, just don't get too high, don't get too low.
Just stay where you're at.
He's gonna get a course record today.
Like you're not gonna stop it. Like it's coming, but you got to see him flip a switch on like the 7th hole, and it was just like boom, and you're like, what happened? When I saw him at Montevallo, this is the first time I started recognizing I think some of it's personality, some of it's how you were brought up. He had a lot of adversity as a kid. If you don't have a lot of adversity, it's hard to learn that gear later on. But where was I going to go with this story?
Well, I'll tell you
You're
this.
going to cut me off. It's great.
Well, go.
Go. I can't remember.
Okay.
So it's fine.
Well, my quick little story is.
I remember now. It's
okay.
good.
All right, yeah.
So
go for it.
We were at Montevallo, and I looked at him. We were on the putting green. A bunch of his other teammates were behind him, and I was just trying to talk to him, but a couple of them overheard it. I was like, you're going to break 60 one day. I don't know when, but you're going to break 60. And some of the other guys on the team were like, yeah, whatever. And he was like shooting 77 at the time, but I could tell he had something different. And last year, I got a text from him. And he was actually texting me in the middle of his round he was playing. And at the end, he shot 58. And he said, what do you think they're all saying now? Like, it's different. And I don't know that you can teach it. You can refine it. My final chapter of my first book, the Champions Playbook, like that segment, the birdie game that I put in there, you're going to make a birdie every 4, you start over. I gave him that game, and that's what flipped the switch for him. Was just like, I didn't teach it, but I gave him an opportunity to realize he can keep going.
Well, and I think you can learn that, and I think you can teach it, but I think there is a point in an athlete's life where that switch is either on or it's off at one point, and if you miss the mark, like you're done. And the reason I bring that up, and that's my personal opinion, because when I was playing my short time at Tennessee and I was taking batting practice, there's a guy who comes up and he's in our batting practice group. And right now I'm just like this, I'm the lowest guy on the total pole at Tennessee. And I get in the cage and I hit a few to the gaps. I hit one that one hops the wall. I hit one that actually hits the wall. And I hop out of the cage and I'm like, wow, that was a good round. Like I just showed him what I'm worth. And Alaric Solari is his name. He plays for the Minnesota Twins organization right now.
With a name like that.
He is 2 years younger than me at the time. He's a brand new freshman, and his forearms are the size of trees, small trees. And he gets in the cage, and he's using like just a standard bat. He might have even been using wood that day. He hops in the cage. I'm looking behind him, and we were talking a little bit beforehand. And there's just a sound off a baseball bat that is just different. It's like when you hear the spin off of a golf ball, and it's just like a cannon. And he hits 3 home runs in that batting practice round. He hits 2 to the opposite field, which is the hardest thing to do in baseball. 2 to the longest part of the field and the opposite side of the park. And he hops out of the cage and he's like, "Man, I missed a few there." And I'm just like, "Dude, like, what's happening here? What is happening?" US Open.
Yes.
They're chatting.
Yeah,
Go for it.
so Hank would talk about he was out. Hank played on tour for a little while before he got into the golf business and started teaching. But he's on the driving range, getting ready for an event and hitting shots and getting warmed up, and things are feeling pretty good. And he's starting to recognize, like, the guy behind him, his shots don't sound the same as mine. Like, they sound different. He just minds his own business, keeps hitting. He's like, that's a little different, and turns around, and sure enough, it's Jack Nicklaus. Like, yeah, I don't have a chance. That's
Oh my
Hank said,
God.
like, that was the moment when he realized, like, yeah, nope, I don't have it. Like, I just don't. Like,
Oh my God.
And Austin has that sound off the club. Like, even you line him up with a dozen other guys at top in the country, and it's like there's something different.
And what
It's
is that
hard to-
physically? Is it the compression of the golf ball that you can just get to
There's
at
just
some point?
no loss of efficiency, and they just seem to find, like, you can give him just about any golf swing, and he still finds the middle of the club face. You're like, how do you do that? Like, some people can just find the middle of the face no matter what you give them.
Eye-hand coordination.
Yeah, it's just, and that's where TPI is helping to develop all that from the junior. We'll talk junior development and player development generally on the next one.
Sounds good. Well, that sounds like a good place to end it. We're going to do one more with Miss Siew here, so stay tuned to that. We're going to sign off here from the Champions Playbook inside the Persimmon Pub. Remember to go and look at us on YouTube now. This video is going to be up on YouTube. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts. Make sure to give us a rating and a review as well. A review really helps, but a 5-star rating would really help us out, especially when you go onto Apple Music and search golf. So, Scott, what are our numbers too, as far as like where we're at in the golf standings on podcasts?
I think we're in the top 70 at this point.
I love
and we're
that.
in the top 25% of all podcasts on all platforms.
Love that too. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Also, thank you Strixon and thank you Arcos for sponsoring this winter of the Champions Playbook and cracking the code from Scott. So from Jack, Scott, and Siew here, we're going to see you on the next one. Peace.